Hey guys, I'm Rich from NeoWin. Today we're doing second impressions of the HTC 10. So here's how it works, right? During an unboxing and first impressions video, I haven't used the phone, so I can't really say anything knowledgeable about it. I mean, if you're the type of guy that judges a phone based on specs and benchmarks, well, then that's really all you need. But if you actually want to see real world usage, I can't say anything during an unboxing because I haven't used it yet. But a few days later, I have used it, and I know a hell of a lot more than I did during the unboxing. I'm also not ready for a review yet, so that's where second impressions come in. Kind of like an informal review where I really not all the facts are in yet. All right, so a lot of this is going to focus on HTC's redemption. In fact, I think this is their second step toward redemption. The first being with the HTC One A9 that I have right here, and this is the HTC 10, right? And it all starts with the One M9, which was their flagship last year. They dropped the One M part, and now they just call it the 10. The One M9, believe it or not, was a good phone, but that's just it. It was good, not great. The display was actually terrible. It was a 1080p Super LCD 3, and the white balance was totally off. So anything that was supposed to be white actually was slightly tinted green. And the camera was good as well, but this was at a time when Samsung and LG and Apple and Microsoft were doing things that were great or amazing, because Apple had just introduced phase detect autofocus in the iPhone 6. Right, so you had this super fast focusing, perfect pictures in very little time. Samsung was doing the same thing. LG had laser focus, and HTC was just kind of trying to figure out how to make a good camera, because the One M7 and M8 they had 4 megapixel cameras, right? And the idea was to have larger pixels and it would create less noise in the photo. And it didn't work out, because really, a 4 megapixel camera, you start zooming in on that thing and it degrades rapidly. So they came back in the One M9 with a 20 megapixel camera. The ultra pixel theory was gone, and it was okay. It was good, just nothing compared to what else was on the market. So you had the display and you had the camera, which just weren't up to par. It was a powerful phone, and it was a year when 1440p displays were the big thing. And personally, I'm of the belief that there is absolutely no benefit to 1440p over 1080p on a display this size. Right? So I admired them for using 1080p. It became one of the more powerful phones of the year because of that. Snapdragon 810 paired with 1080p. Of course, everybody called them out for the throttling, but that was an issue with all flagships last year. It was really a bad year for Android flagships. But that's just what it was. It was a good phone, not a great phone. And they needed to redeem themselves, and they started to with the One A9, and they gave it an AMOLED display, so finally had a nice display. It was 1080p. It's a mid-range phone. It's got a Snapdragon 617 processor. I called it the best phone of the year. And it used phase detect autofocus in the rear camera, ultra pixel front camera. This is a great phone. And since they used a mid-range chipset, it was exciting to see what they were planning for the HTC One M10 as we knew it at the time, because this was their step to getting back on track. So this would be where they were back on track. And I believe that they pulled it off. From what I've seen so far, I've only had this phone for about 4 days.
And this uses a Super LCD 5 display. I don't know where Super LCD 4 went, to be honest. I haven't looked into it too much. The display, right, it is amazing. If you didn't know by looking at a spec sheet that this is Super LCD 5, that it was an LCD panel, you wouldn't believe that it's not an AMOLED. The display is absolutely beautiful. It's vibrant. It's frankly one of, if not the best LCD that I have ever seen. Right? So I have to say the thing that's most exciting for me about this phone is that there's no gimmicks about it. I'm toying with the idea of calling it the first Android phone worth buying, although I know that that's not really true. But you notice there's nothing here. There's no internet app. There's no email app. That's because we have a Gmail app and we have Chrome, and that's something that we've known from Android phones for some time. Is that you tend to get two of everything. So you can see right here in the Samsung Galaxy Note 5, we have an internet app, we have an email app, and we have a gallery app. While there's also a photos app. There's just two of everything because there's the Google app and then there's the OEM app, and it's not really helpful to anybody. So that's something that HTC cut out, and it's interesting to see that they really slimmed down HTC Sense. You can see here the one A9 has Sense 7. This is it's called Sense Home, where at Mobile World Congress, the woman who demoed it to me called it the boxes. But you can see that there's home, work, or out, and you can set it to show you certain apps while you're at either of those locations. And I thought it was a really great feature, but it's not on this phone. You'll even see if you go into settings that you go to the software information, and it doesn't tell you anything about what version of Sense is on this phone. That's really interesting to me because it really seems like they're trying to step away from it a little bit. We still have Blink feed over here, which is fine by me. Honestly, I'm not a fan of stock Android. I know it's not a popular opinion. I think it's boring. I hate it when people say to me, "But it's Android the way Google intended it to be." Like there's something that's somehow holier about the way that Google intended it. I like skinned Android. There's a lot of great skins out there. I think HTC Sense is one of them. Starting with Sense 6, it wasn't always that way. Samsung is the one that gave these skins a bad name, and they started making TouchWiz lighter with the Galaxy S6, and it never really got there. It's still pretty heavy. The Galaxy S6 still struggles at times with graphics-intensive games, even with 3 gigs of RAM, and the Note 5 was a lot better because it had that 4th gig of RAM. And if you really need 4 gigs of RAM in a phone, you're doing something wrong. Now, if you're watching this video, I'm sure you've been following the reviews that we've been seeing out there. They're everywhere. The embargo was lifted a few days ago. A lot of bloggers criticize HTC for not doing anything to differentiate. And I ask, why? Isn't that the reason that Android phones can be so bad? People were always upset about the dual camera in the HTC One M8. The eyeball scrolling in the Galaxy S4, it's just not necessary. It doesn't help anybody. And these things end up just being gimmicky. And up until this point, and I really think that this is the one, pun intended, there wasn't really just an all-around great Android phone. Just gimmick-free, great in just about every area. There just isn't one that does that. The Samsung phones, I would say, come the closest, but TouchWiz really weighs it down. Now, I know what everybody's going to say because Android fans always say it to me. Well, you can just flash a custom ROM. You shouldn't have to, and that's kind of the point. So one of my favorite things about HTC Sense is themes. I tried searching for a Doctor Who theme. I still have no idea why there isn't one there. But yeah, you can just pick a theme and it installs new wallpaper, new sounds, new everything, and it just turns your phone into a completely new experience. I love it. They introduced it with Sense 7, so if you have a phone, I mean that's on the One M9, but it's with the new stripped down version of Sense that we're seeing. It's really great to see that they didn't take this out because there's a lot of really cool stuff here that I wouldn't want to give up for anything. Like I said, I'm a fan of Sense. So another thing that they changed, and this was really interesting to me, but then again, I'm a smartphone camera geek. They changed the camera app. So you see that this is the front camera here, but we have a toggle to switch between the front and rear camera. That was never there before. Now, notice that laser autofocus is blocked. You can see by my fingers it's not blocked. That comes up a lot, more than it should. All right, so and it's just I'm I can't really say anything about that because it's just it seems like something that comes up more than it should. All right, so we have camera settings over here. We have Zoe camera has made a return. That was gone for a little while. Hyperlapse, slow motion. Now selfie photo, selfie video. Right, we have the different modes over here. Settings are down here. It's a completely new camera app that we've seen in HTC phones for a very long time now. So I can show you with the One A9 because they haven't updated the app on this phone, which is interesting. It tells me that it's something that's exclusive to the new version of HTC Sense. So you can see the camera button right there is different. This is what you had to do to switch between the rear camera and the front camera: panorama, hyperlapse, pro, slow motion. You can see there's no Zoe there. That might be because this is a mid-range phone. And settings are down here. Right? It's a completely new app, and I like the new app. I like that there's a toggle to switch between the two. It makes sense the way you just swipe in from the left to get your options there. It's all really good stuff that they did here. They really put a lot of thought into this phone, and it's becoming more and more apparent to me the more I use it. It supports AirPlay. Now, that's something I haven't tested yet, but you can AirPlay to an Apple TV. Now, that is exciting to me because they've when people talk about what the best set-top box is, everyone says, well, it might be the Apple TV, but really just if you have an iPhone, because any other phone uses Miracast, and Apple TV supports AirPlay. Roku supports Miracast, so that might be the best for you. Or Google Cast might be the best for you with Nexus Player or something. So this supports AirPlay. So if you felt locked into the Apple ecosystem because you have an Apple TV, you don't have to anymore. Now, there's other phones that support AirPlay, but from what I understand, those phones kind of hack the API somehow, or however they did it. HTC is actually the first one that licensed the technology. So speaking of the camera, we have 12 megapixels, 1/2.3 inch sensor. Autofocus is blocked somehow again. Like I said, I see this a lot. It's interesting to maybe just you can't take pictures that close up because if I put it up like this, it doesn't. Anyway, 1/2.3 inch sensor, f1.8 aperture. That's pretty good. I mean, well, it's really good. LG's using f1.8. There's some new phones out there that use f1.7. They're just really making these things larger, which is really fantastic. But really, the camera is just so much faster than previous models. You have the flash on there, but just you see how fast I can take pictures. That's not something that you saw in earlier models. Another thing actually is that the front camera. This is it. It has their timer, which is been in HTC phones forever. So you take a phone selfie, and you notice that it does have that software flash, but it counts on go. So you know how you see in like a TV show, say, all right, we'll count to 3. And it say, all right, are we gonna go on 3, 2, 1 or 3, 2, 1, go? So it takes the photo on go, where previous HTC phones had done it on 1, you know? So there's a bit of an extra delay there. All right, so 12 megapixels for a rear camera seems to be the standard these days. Apple did it in the iPhone 6s, Samsung did it in the Galaxy S7, and Google did it in their Nexus devices. Now, Samsung, for a company like Samsung to actually lower the amount of megapixels really says something, because Samsung has been known for gimmicky stuff, and the higher megapixel count is the perfect example of a gimmick, because really, I mean, a 4K display is 8.3 megapixels, and that's at 16 by 9. If you take your pictures at 4 by 3, that's 6.2 megapixels, and you should take your pictures at 4 by 3. I'm not going to go into why. That's a story for another time. Now, if your display is 1440p, that's 3.7 megapixels or 2.8 megapixels at 4 by 3. 1080p is 2.1 megapixels or 1.6 megapixels. So anything larger than that, anything larger than what your display can fit is going to get scaled down. So, what do you really get from a higher resolution? Well, you get the ability to crop without losing quality, okay, and zoom, stuff like that. So, 12 megapixels should be fine because larger pixels do produce a less noisy photo. So there's benefits to each. So while I'm singing this phone's praises, that nothing is perfect. As we can see here, we have a keyboard that's looks great for the regular keyboard. When we go to the number keyboard, it's a very different design than we're used to seeing. Now, it's not a huge deal. Obviously, it's Android, so you can go to the Play Store and get a new keyboard. I'm sure half of you guys already do have your keyboards that you love to use. But I maintain the theory that you really just shouldn't have to. I'm sure you get used to this after a while. I haven't yet. What I've been doing is sticking to just holding this to get a number out there. It works. Um, that's the one thing that I haven't found optimal about this phone. The fingerprint reader itself is pretty good. It's not, it's pretty fast. Um, so it's not as good, not as accurate as say an iPhone 6s or either of the new Nexuses, which have amazing fingerprint readers. But it's so much better than say the Galaxy S7, which just uses the same fingerprint reader that it used last year in the Galaxy S6. So this fingerprint reader does seem to be the same that they use in the HTC One A9 that we have right here. It's not a button that gets depressed, similar to the Nexus 6P and the 5X, although it acts like one. We have on-screen buttons here that light up when you touch them. They do get in the way sometimes when you're trying to play a game or something. Other than that, though, the general design of the phone is wonderful. It's not the lightest phone on the market. It's not the thinnest phone on the market, but it does feel good to hold. It doesn't feel too heavy. It's the curved back. It's comfortable in your hand, right? So it works for me. I like it. Honestly, this is a phone that I if I was to switch to Android full time, which I don't use any OS full time, it's not really something that I can do. If I was to switch to Android full time, I think this would be the phone. Um, Camera tests so far are preliminary. I've done the camera tests. I've taken the pictures. I haven't written up a comparison yet. So you're going to see comparisons on NeoWin where I compare the pictures to the Lumia 950 or the HTC One A9. I'm going to have to compare it to the One A9 because that was really the first step toward redemption. So once we start, and I'll compare it to the iPhone 6s Plus as well. So once we start comparing those, then we can really get a handle on how good this camera is, because that's such an important part of a smartphone. You see the front camera here, it's a big sensor. I have so many phones, and you can see they all just have smaller sensors. Um, so that sensor actually has optical image stabilization. It does claim to be the first smartphone with a front camera that has OIS, which is really impressive. I love the software flash. I wish that was a feature that everybody implemented. Microsoft hasn't yet. This is the first time HTC has done it. Samsung just did it in the Galaxy S7. I also wish these companies would implement them in older phones. LG and Motorola and Apple do it as well. Apple didn't implement it in older phones. I don't see why it's so hard. I know there's a special part of the display to make it light up brighter than it usually does, but at least let people with older displays light it up as much as it can. Other than that, I mean, great phone. It's $699, and so far, I think it's worth every penny because there are more expensive phones out there, and I think this is better than them. Maybe not the iPhone. It depends on if you like iOS or Android, but so far, I would take this over the Galaxy S7, which I reviewed just a few weeks ago. Anyway, guys, I'm Rich from NeoWin. Have a great night.